Anyway, here we are. How good was that episode that we just listened to, the Joshua Live? Extraordinary.
It was extraordinary. And you know, it's funny. I've been listening to, I think the last three today and the two previous ones were really, really powerful. I listened to the one that was from December 8th, like 4 or 5 times, and I transcribed it as well. It's you know, this idea of alignment, right? It's the idea of acceptance, the idea of, everyone's talking about manifestations, right? I want to manifestate my world. I want to manifestate million. It's such a generic, it's become such a generic word, but how you do it, nobody discusses it besides maybe Abraham and Joshua, right? And the way that I think Gary, and he said this in the December 8th podcast of Joshua Live, which was our live call from December 8th. And he goes, everyone wants the $1 million or the new mate or the house. Then they say they're going to feel good, right? And he goes, that's the complete opposite the way reality works. You have to be in love and acceptance, right? And once you're in that frequency, and then the universe tunes in and gives you more of that. Because if you're in the lack, it's tuning into the lack, and it's just pouring more lack on top of you. Like, I don't have this, I want that. Once you become that, once you're living in that victimhood, to get out of it, the momentum that is created by one thought, and then a second thought, and then a third thought, it almost becomes unstoppable. And you start hearing people say, why does this always happen to me? This always happens to me. I can't believe this is happening again, right? And the way that Joshua and Gary explain it, for me, has been wildly enlightening, where I get it. If you think something is wrong, you're a victim. You're letting, today he talked about, too, great analogy too, like being on an island, right? Like, you're on an island and you think you got to ship everything in to you. And it's like, no, you don't. So I've absolutely loved, to your point, the discussion of the last 3 podcasts have really connected with me personally.
Yeah, the manifestation thing is very interesting. I follow on Reddit a thread, a subreddit, I think it's called Law of Attraction. And most of the people, not all, but most of the people on there seem to think that manifestation is some kind of Jedi mind trick, where I want to manifest this person, or a person who is ... or this job, or this car, or this amount of money, or this house, or whatever it might be. They think that it's just a very simple trick that they've somehow got the secret to, where I can get this thing. And that's to them what manifesting is all about. And I seldom comment on that. I think I will, once I get this LOA info website going. I got the domain for that, because that's one of the handles I use on Reddit, because it's such a complex thing to try and explain to someone who's stuck in that version of manifesting. Like, they think that law of attraction is something that they can just kind of turn on, or they can turn off again. That, okay, I'll go in here, I'll turn this switch, and then I can do law of attraction. I'll get the thing I want, that car or that job or sum of money or this person in my life, and then I can just turn it off again and go back to normal life. Not understanding that, of course, their entire life is a reflection of their current vibration, and everything in it, whether they like it or not, is their current manifestation. And it's not like you can stop manifesting. And some people seem to think, oh no, that didn't work for me, I'm going to stop doing it. And it's like, well, you can't stop doing it. It doesn't work that way, because once the moment you're born, or maybe even before, then you have a vibration and you're attracting everything into your reality. So that's kind of interesting to see that very fundamental interpretation of manifesting. But you're right, it's only really when you start to look at the work of Abraham or Joshua that you start to understand really what manifesting is all about, that we've manifested everything so far. And as you say, and this is the hard thing, I guess, for a lot of those people who are stuck in that kind of very fundamental version. I don't know where they got it from, but it's not really what law of attraction is all about. But if you're
The
stuck in
secret,
that,
right? The secret started it,
I say, okay, fine. Yeah, that would make
right?
sense. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. So if you're stuck in that, then it's like, well, I mean, maybe that's really where those people are at, and they aren't really right now to be able to understand the next level of concepts. But the thing is, which you touched on, is that if you want a thing, whether it's a mate or a sum of money or a car or whatever, if you want that thing, what you really want is the feeling that you will have once you have that thing. You will imagine if you get a sum of money or a car, for example, you'll feel some great satisfaction. And you may briefly feel that, like you do when you go to the shopping expedition and you end up with a whole bunch of shopping. You may briefly feel that, but maybe not for very long. And then after that, there's not that feeling anymore. And in particular with a mate, what you really want is to feel loved. But if you're wanting to feel loved, or indeed if you want those other things, you're really coming from a position of lack. And when you come from the position of lack, you're more likely to continue to explore more lack, because that is your vibration. And so the secret, as you know, not that sort of secret, not the book The Secret, but the trick, if you want, the real ninja mind trick is to feel that thing anyway, which in the case of a mate would to actually be loving rather than seeking to feel loved, as actually to offer love. And in the case of the money or the car, it's well, how would I feel if I had that? Or how do I imagine I'll feel if I had that? And what if I actually had that right now? So and then if you could cultivate that feeling without the thing, then that really is the actual secret. If there was a secret, that would be it. Is how do you cultivate that feeling you imagine you might have by getting a thing? How do you actually have that feeling regardless of the thing? And then you manage to detach yourself from the things, and the things that do arrive will be at a far more authentic, genuine, and valuable level for you.
well, I think what you just said there was the key, and that's the difference. Because to your point, the self-development gurus that are out there that you and I have been through, right, around the block, you can write down a list of 10 goals, right, and you can go after those. But it's so great the way Joshua and Gary talk about it. Like, those are your goals today. 12 months from now, you'll achieve those. When you get those, it's unsatisfying. So the idea of manifestation event, or the idea of manifesting your life on an item by item basis, right, without what you just said, right, this true feeling, this authentic feeling, it just becomes this emptiness of continuing to be unhappy, unsatisfied. Yeah, you get some stuff, and yeah, you can focus on things and get an item, right? I mean, a version of that item, whatever it may be, if you're feeling the right way and doing the right thing. But if it's not your authentic self, then you're back in the same place, and you're happy for 10 minutes and you're unhappy. It's the idea of manifesting, tuning into that frequency of love, tuning into that frequency of acceptance, and seeing what happens. I had a situation last night where I was, and it goes to momentum, right? Where one thing led to another thing. Next thing I know, I was rolling down this hill of negativity, and I had to stop. I'm like, boom, stop. Boom, like right now. Okay, I know what I'm doing. I see this. I'm like, why is this happening for me? And sometimes contrast is good, right? And I think Gary says that as well. And I saw the contrast, and I was like, okay, I don't want to be this way, and I'm going to stop right now. But I could feel the negative momentum that occurred, and I fed into it for a short period of time, right? And wanted to bounce back out and say, okay, I'm not. And the idea that I think The Secret, the book, and a lot of other sort of, maybe self-help gurus, development gurus out there, I was like, hey, you make this list of things you want, you read it twice a day, right? And then you go about your life attacking whatever you need to attack, whatever's going on, the negativity, right? None of that has changed, right? It's just, read your list. And I've done that, and it's worked for me. Like I read my list, and I got, but I'm not happy. I wasn't happy. Right. And I do think this is where What Gary's talking about, and what Joshua are talking about, even what Abraham's talking about, is a very different manifestation. It's a manifestation of fulfillment, of happiness, and as you said, authenticity. Like, that's like, how do you get there? Because you could accumulate things and still be absolutely miserable.
Yeah, okay. Two things I want to say. One is about authenticity, so remind me to come back to that in a second. However, I just read this article in the news online, and this mortgage brokerage in Australia did some research, and they concluded that a large number of their high-earning clients were unhappy in their work, and the people in the highest earning bracket, which was not like 500,000 million plus, it was maybe like, I don't know, 150 to 250K, that sort of a bracket, they were the least happy. And then it quoted an example of a woman who bought a home for 2.3 million, and she had a big mortgage, and she has a job in tech, and she hates the job. It's unsatisfying. She doesn't agree with the company's morals and ethics, but in her mind, she's trapped, her and her husband, because any other job that she would take would pay at least 40 grand a year less. And in her mind, I can't do that because I've got my mortgage. Now, that is kind of a self-created loop, or a vicious circle or cycle, and it's a bit of a hamster wheel. And it's like, well, yeah, you've essentially sold your soul in order to have this house, because you think the house will make you feel better, but in fact, you're getting the opposite result. So I thought that was a fascinating article, so I saved it on Evernote as a reference for my how to make money authentically.
Yeah, in America, we call that golden handcuffs.
Yeah, I think they actually mentioned that term. Yeah, I think that's. I mean, it's such a good description. It is golden handcuffs. So, and I thought it was interesting that the people making, I'll check the numbers, but the people making like 100 to 150K, they were pretty unhappy, but the people making 150 to 250 were unhappier again. And I thought that kind of, it's like, well, how long do you want to do that for in your life? Like, do you want to do this for a year, 5 years, 10 years, until you retire? And then if the woman's in, let's say she's 30, for example, or 35, I mean, she could be doing this for 30 or 35 more years. And it's like, do you really want to sell your soul for all that time? And now I'll move into the authenticity. Essentially, she is living an inauthentic life, because you and I have been thinking about and researching and contemplating the nature of authenticity. What does it mean to have an authentic life, or to live authentically? And we reached the point where we discovered that what it means is to live your life close to the way your inner self is, what some people call your higher self, so your non-physical self. So instead of thinking, I want a sum of money or a car or this particular house, it's really about living according to higher purposes and motivations, which is, instead of seeking love because I want this mate, or I want to manifest this particular person, like in the Reddit thread, it's about, I seek to offer love, and I know that I will attract the right people into my life. But it all starts with being loving, rather than the transactional, I want love first of all. And rather than saying I want a car or 10 grand, it's really acting on inspiration every day, doing things you're inspired to do, finding your interests and passions, and then from interests become passions, and passions you will find your purpose. It's really about going down that particular path, isn't it? Than doing stuff really for, because when you get to 95 or 105 and you're on your deathbed, there's pretty much no chance you'll be saying, I'm so glad I stayed with that job that was paying me 250 or 500 grand a year. I'm so glad I did that for 35 years and didn't enjoy a day of it. Man, that was just the best part of my life. As opposed to, you know what, I'm so glad that when I was 45 that I found a way out of that hamster wheel, that golden handcuffs, and I actually found some things I really cared about and started living my life in a more pure and simple way. And sure, some of my friends might have thought I was a bit crazy for giving away all that stuff, but it becomes sort of self-fulfilling, because for example, some people in those roles, they have to put aside 10 or 20 grand a year or more just to have the right clothes and shoes and suits and neckties, handbags, whatever it might be. And of course, and I was in this too once upon a time. You were too, I imagine, that, I had a Mercedes and an Audi, like I had a lot of money tied up in automobiles, and those weren't my only cars either. I had another one for going backcountry, and nowadays I've just got the backcountry version, which is actually a perfectly good road car. It's not as fast as the AMG Mercedes or the Audi S4, but we actually have the most fun in it because we do all the things we really enjoy, and we go on expeditions. So, but when you're in a certain mindset, you do have to have the right accoutrements to match your persona or your image. But once you get rid of that, you don't need to spend. I mean, I have spent a lot of my own clothes at times, but you don't have to, right? You don't need to, because if you're not trying to impress anybody with your shirt, like, I've spent 100 or 150 bucks on a t-shirt, and you're going to laugh, but I bought a series of these white t-shirts the other day, and they were $5 a piece. And I actually took joy in that. I thought, this is very cool. And because, my sister said, oh, you must have a lot of those white t-shirts, meaning that they get dirty so easily. Like, what do you do? Do you throw them away? Do you wash them? It's like, oh, well, I got a dozen of them, So I don't care if I spill the pasta sauce or the red wine on them a little bit, because I'll wash them or chuck them away. And, it's like, there's a strange feeling of liberation in not being attached to expensive cars, expensive clothes, and, getting around in shorts if it's warm, that sort of thing. I love it.
Yeah. I think Tony Robbins calls them like thingles, right? The things you wish for, the things you want to manifest that are, and they're almost like things that you believe you want because society deems them representative of success, representative of, wealth within each segment, right? So my wife was making a lot of money at a job, and she was miserable. I mean, literally miserable. But it was enough money to do it. Nobody had to do anything. I mean, it was so much money that it was silly money. And she's like, I'm so unhappy. And I said, quit tomorrow. And she literally took a job making 25% of what she was making, still a significant amount of money. And I said to her, are you nuts? Well, I don't care how much. I mean, we had this conversation. And on the flip side, my friend, good friend I grew up with, his wife is making an obscene amount of money, and well into the seven figures. And she was like, I'm so unhappy. And he was like, well, you got to stick it out. And I said to him, like, what? You'd rather have your wife miserable? But I would have said that 5 years ago. I would have said, oh yeah, it's you got to stick it out. I thought 5 years ago, so I'm 53 now, up until 48 years old, I thought making money and being miserable went hand in hand. I did not know there was a difference. I did not know you could be happy and working. Everybody, my family, my parents, my sister, my family, my father-in-law, all of us were miserable at work. Miserable. We were making a significant amount of money, and we just chalked it up. We came home miserable. We woke up miserable. But we had money. We had the outfits, we had the clothes, we had the cars, we had the apartment. We did everything we were supposed to be doing that we felt that gave this representation of success, right? And so I was focusing, I was manifesting, I was owning my own company, I was doing this, but I was so miserable and so unhappy. All the other things that were attached to those miserable feelings started showing up in my life as well. And that's what people forget and miss, because yeah, I may want that car, that house, whatever that is, right? Or that mate. But what we're not understanding is you're getting a limited perspective, a limited version of that manifestation, of that creation. You're getting a visual representation of what you think you want, but the feeling deep inside when that appears, okay, is that true, authentic manifestation? And people miss that. So when you get the company like I got, right? I had 15 years of misery, board meetings, lawsuits, bankruptcy. I still got the company, right? People manifest the person they want. And then the person is cheating, miserable, runs them out of money, is abusive, right? Whatever it may be. What they're forgetting is the radio station that you tune into may play that one song because you just ran by it. And you're like, oh, that's the song I like. Well, you listen to it for the next 2 hours, and you're like, oh my God, this is miserable. But you stop there, right? Because you heard that one song. You're like, I got that one thing I wanted. That's what I'm finally realizing. And that to me is like, it's just, my head exploded with that. I'm like, oh my God, that's why everything happened. That's why I bought everything into me. I attracted all of this element, right? You can't push anything away. So if you're sending out this much frequency, and this is my business, right, which I got, but everything else from there out was how I was feeling about it. All that, the bankruptcy, the lawyers. I never dealt with a lawyer my entire life before that. And I haven't dealt with a lawyer since.
Yeah, hey, I'm enjoying not dealing with lawyers these days.
And they're great people. Don't right?
Yeah,
Don't
one of our lawyers
lawyers
is actually a good friend of ours, you know.
right?
And,
Look, how crazy is
but
that?
I'm happy to talk to him socially, but I haven't needed his services for some time, and that's pretty good. And as for the litigation guys, like, you know, I've completely lost touch with them, and I'm so pleased.
Yeah, and so for me, what I'm starting to realize when you talk about, when Gary says and Joshua say, you know, acceptance, and acceptance is love, and love is alignment. I start to realize that it's no longer going after those thing goals, right? I think that's a term that Tony Robbins used. It was I
Yep.
had made a mental note, right? And going after the feeling of just acceptance and love of everything, because then you're tuning into the right station, and you're going to get that rock and roll all the time. You're not going to get, or you're going to get country, right? Or you're going to get pop, or you're going to get classic. You're going to get everything you're looking for versus a variety of stuff that you just may not be looking for.
That Thingles thing reminds me of the term that Joshua uses, which is trinkets.
Yeah.
It's a similar thing. So I was in the investment industry. I was a partner in an investment advisory firm. I sold out at the end of 2004, and I was sort of became quite disengaged from it, and it wasn't my passion. I knew that, but I think the reasons I gave myself at the time were to do with sort of investment industry related issues as to why I didn't like the business and the direction it was taking. Because I was one of, you know, a number of stockholders, like I think I owned a third of it at the time, and we had an independent investment committee, and then we also had the board. So even I disagreed with the direction, I was one vote out of several, so I could go on record as disagreeing, but nothing changed. So I thought that was the reason I wasn't happy with it, was all of those sorts of things. I basically found, and still think, a lot about that industry is quite inauthentic, which I can explain in a minute. But I realized now that what it was really about was that this stuff was kind of off mission or off purpose for me. So that kind of work and doing all that stuff, it was all very good and I could do it very well, but it was completely meaningless. And so I now realize it was because it wasn't my passion, it wasn't my purpose, that it became harder and harder to make myself do it, right? Because my inner self was protesting louder and louder and louder. It's like, do you really want to go down this track? Like, when you've got a life of, you know, what I call fabulosity, fabulousness, when you've got a fabulous life ahead of you that you could be taking, why are you going down this path all the time? Why are you doing that? The thing about the investment industry is that there's a concept called alpha, and alpha is simply the return you make over and above the benchmark, right? So if you've got a portfolio of American stocks, then your benchmark might be the S&P 500 or the S&P smaller cap index, right? And if you've got a portfolio of global stocks, it might be the MSCI, you know, the Morgan Stanley Capital Index. So alpha is your ability to make, or your return over and above the benchmark. Now, statistically, it is rare and impossible, pretty much, very rare anyway, to consistently produce alpha. And a lot of people imagine that they're getting an alpha return, but that's mostly because they have a brief run of luck, or because they're not measuring against the correct benchmark, or they've taken a huge risk, which sooner or later will turn around and go in the other direction. So I realized that the most important thing, if somebody came to me with $1 million or 5 million or whatever, and they needed an investment portfolio, you know, to see them through for the rest of their days, the most important thing really is to work out what their risk profile is. Like, how much volatility can they incur or uncertainty of return, and then say, right, and that's based on personality and time frame and total net worth and all that kind of stuff. So that's almost like a, you can make an app to show people pretty much what their risk tolerance is. And once you've got that, you've got the pie chart. To be honest, the best thing somebody can do is just get like an index fund or an exchange traded fund, something like that, something with really low management fees that fits their profile, set it up and forget about it, right? So all of that stuff about having an advisor checking it every quarter or every 6 months or whatever it might be, and new stock issues, that may or may not, blah, blah, blah. So all of that is really just like it's to seduce people into it, really, but over statistically, there's little to no value in that. And so if you boil down the entire investment advisory industry, you can just about robotize or automate the risk profile selection, and then the funds that people should go into, really, the lower the management fee, the better they're going to do. And so the rest of it, I realized once I studied finance and understood the maths of finance and finance theory, because a lot of academics have done a lot of research on this. So a lot of that stuff, modern portfolio theory and all that's very well established. I realized that fundamentally the industry was not, in my opinion, an authentic industry that I wanted to be a part of, because there was too much smoke and mirrors and feeling fabulous because you've been invited into a stock issue or something like that. So it wasn't just that as I later realized, that it was not a match in terms of my true purpose or meaning. I also thought that the industry was, in my opinion, not authentic. That part of it, the advisory industry.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, it sort of makes sense, right? I mean, once you go to a formulaic approach in anything, right, it's the authenticity of it goes away, right? I mean, that goes hand in hand. I mean, I think, and maybe that's why too. I've probably, it's probably why I am feeling out of sync with the industry I'm in as well. And it's this, formulaic approach to your activities, and it's I think the enthusiasm and the passion and the excitement for the activities they're just gone. I mean, you're plugging in numbers, right? You're plugging in answers to, or you're plugging in responses to a specific set of questions in most of these industries, right? So where you're not doing that is sort of what we talked about today, even on the call, is the creative side. It's those actors, right? Those musicians, painters, right? Sculptors, artists. Those people are truly connecting, right, with some sort of inspiration that is not anyway formulaic or prearranged. It's sort of, hey, it's whatever we're feeling today. I envy that. I envy that. Sitting down writing. I do that. I do it myself, and I look forward to the day that that I could earn a living, comfortably doing it. But I write every day and journal every day, and I have the most fun doing that. That's to me, even doing our calls, I have more fun doing this 1 hour a week than I do on the 50 other Zoom calls I have with business.
Yeah, well, I find that when I'm making the course that I'm creating about how to make money authentically, when I start doing that, I have to remind myself this is actually work that could earn me some money later when I sell the course, because it feels like fun and it feels like I'm goofing off compared to the other work that I have to do.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So like, and I keep playing with, and I'll have to send it to you because I think I'm finally in a good spot with my my daughter, right? So the beginning of next year, I'm going to go speak to her sorority, and I kind of, talking with Gary and understanding what was going on. I sort of, it's a starter's guide to becoming a deliberate creator, and it's sort of these 5 elements. Like, what is the law of attraction? What is source? What is alignment? What is momentum? And then what is your emotional guidance system? Once you start to understand what those things are, then you can start to, I think, manifest things that have that have some meaning in your life, right? That are that truly, I think, add to your happiness. Because when you get the car, a month after driving the car, you don't care about it anymore. When you get the house, a month after living in the house, you don't care anymore. Well, well, if it's an authentic element, then you're going to love that house. My wife and I moved into a house just before COVID in September of 2019 or October, and we love it. It's the greatest house we've ever lived in. We love it. We feel like it was a gift, because we all got locked down for 6 months in this house. And the way the house is laid out is there's a lot of little sort of these little special rooms, right, where you can then go off and be alone and have some space. When our last house was just sort of a big open space where we were all looking at each other. So you talk about the universe aligning for you, right? And my first urge was like, oh, honey, do we really need to get a new house? Do we really need that? And that was all fear-based.
Yeah. It is important to understand when you feel those questions that it is fear-based, because Joshua says the process is to get into alignment, receive inspiration, you get an idea, you think about the idea, and then the fear arises naturally because it's a deviation from your normal path or where you are now. And the fear might be, oh, can we afford it? Do we really want it? Are you sure you want to go there? All that sort of stuff. And then you think of all these reasons, and then you realize those are fears. You push past the fear, you take the action, which raises your vibration to a higher level. And then you get back into alignment with the whole thing. And once you're back in alignment, you receive the next inspiration. And then the fear arises and you repeat the process. One of the interesting things about that is they say, don't start thinking about step 2, 5, or 10 when you're at step 1. Like, just take step 1, deal with that. And then because you're not a vibrational match to those subsequent steps that you imagine might be required, you're only a vibrational match to the first one once you push past the fear and take it. So that's a very interesting thing. It's like planning ahead may have some advantages, but you can see that it's largely pointless. And even in businesses, like a lot of the time, you start with a plan at the beginning of the year, but what you actually did by the end of the year is pretty different. And certainly with life in general, that is true as well.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. I mean, I do think that, and Gary said today is, it was interesting. How do you reach more people, right? And that was sort of the idea for the conversation. And what I did like, and I do sort of feel is this: the people, especially the younger generation, the I generation, and I guess Generation Z, are open to discussing or understanding what manifestation is or what creation is. And that's the first door, right? Once you're willing to believe you can create something, right, in your mind, and then bring it to reality, that opens the door for the conversation. I think that, that Joshua is having, that Abraham is having, right, to this much deeper spiritual meaning, right, of acceptance and love and alignment, which are the keys. I mean, without alignment, everything you could talk about, everything you can go without alignment, without understanding of what alignment is and what source is. I remember when I first started doing this years ago, people were talking about source. People would talk about meditating and seeing this giant light come down. And I'm like, where's the light? Where's source? Where is it? People say it's 3 feet above your head. I'm like, it's right above and I'm like, I don't see it, So the idea that, and Gary explains it better than anybody. Joshua explains what source is better than anybody, which is everything in all of us. But it opens the door, right, to have these conversations and people to go, okay, that makes sense. And if you start to think about it, it all lines up and you're like, okay, I get it now. But the pull of the illusion, right, which is this playground, it's like that ride over there, you keep looking over there and you're like, I still want to go on that ride. I still want to go on that ride. And we get pulled back in, we get pulled back in just to experience that ride. And I think, and Gary said it the other day, or Jessica did, contrast is good. Like you need to have, right? It reminds you.
Yeah, contrast is how we birth desires, really, I think, isn't it? Well, a way to birth a desire. And I know Abraham talks about rockets of desire, and Joshua talks about they're born of contrast. So one of the tools you mentioned that you're going to talk to your daughter's sorority about is the emotional guidance system, which I think is a very powerful one. But just want to tell you a tiny anecdote that you triggered for me when one of my step grandsons was really quite young. We took him through to our holiday place, and he'd never been on a plane before. And as we went up through the clouds, he'd never been through the clouds before. I'd given him the window seat because it's spectacular, especially the first time you ever see it. There was two things he said as he went through the clouds. The first one was his uncle Dean had passed, transitioned some time ago, and he's looking at me and he says, as we go through the clouds and come out, he says, "Where's Dean?" Expecting to see all the people in his life who'd passed, because we
Wow,
were
that's
essentially in
great.
heaven. And then he also wanted to know where the angels were.
I love that. Yeah, I love that.
That was
Well, you know,
beautiful.
it's interesting because Jessica said it. I think you were on the call too. She said it kind of blew my mind the other day that the people around us are also. So while I was limited in my thinking of what this emotional guidance system is, meaning, hey, if I'm not feeling good, then it's probably not right for me, right? If I'm feeling uneasy about it and I'm feeling sick about it, well, that's probably not the direction to go in, right? You know, it's like those, if you have a choice between two things, but it's also the people around you. So you're walking into a situation, right? And let's say the people that you're going to be associating with are not the type of people you want, right? Or you realize that these may not. That's another gift. Like, okay, whoa, wake up. Like, hello, where are you going? Right? Who are you associating with? Like, I look back at my past businesses and who I bought in on as business partners, who we bought in as investors, and I knew right off the bat, I'm like, I don't like this person. Like, there's something off about this. But I went ahead and did it because there was money to be found, right? But it's the idea that people are also part of that, a guidance system, in addition to your emotional guidance system,
Right.
is something I had not thought of before.
Right. Yes, I guess that's because you and that person were not a vibrational match. So in terms of the emotional guidance system, for anybody listening or watching at a later date, the idea behind that is that if you feel bad, get a negative emotion, that tells you that you are out of alignment, and that means that you're not seeing things the way that your inner self sees things. And if you're receiving positive emotions and feeling good, which is how you want to feel all the time, ideally, then that means you are in alignment and you are seeing things the same way as your inner self. So if you perform an act of pure love or service, and you're not doing it from a transactional point of view, but it is from pure love, you're generally going to feel really good. The other person feels really good. You're in alignment. Your inner self is in alignment, you know, with theirs. Like, the whole thing fits together perfectly. But so it's a very useful tool, because people feel a negative emotion and they think, well, what do I do with my negative emotion? And they might go to therapy. Or one of my brothers once said to me that emotions are something, the whole point is to control your emotions. That's what it's all about, that you must control your emotions. And I guess because essentially, if you followed your emotions, who knows what mayhem may occur in your life. But what happens, as we know, is that if you keep ignoring that message from your emotional guidance system, from your inner self, and your inner self is saying, Rob, I'm making you feel bad because you need to notice this thing. You need to work out what is your limiting belief, reduce its intensity, and move past that thing. And when Rob didn't listen, the inner self says, Rob, are you not listening? I'm going to give this thing to you double. I'm going to double up now. So I'm going to give you double the emotion. Like, try and squeeze that or push that aside or ignore it. And then it just keeps amplifying and ramping up until eventually you get sick or have a crisis if it's something important. So I knew at the time that I didn't agree with my brother's take on all of that. But even if you took the therapy model, which, you know, I guess obviously has some value in certain circumstances, even recognizing emotions and understanding what drives those emotions, where do they come from, I mean, that's really the first step. But I love this model in particular because it's very simple. If I'm feeling a negative emotion, I'm out of alignment. It means I'm not seeing things the way my inner self does. And the reason is because I have limiting belief. So what is that limiting belief? prove to yourself it's not true, reduce its intensity, and then your vibration rises, you're in alignment, you move to a new level. And so that model, I think, is really powerful. It's such a simple tool.
Yeah, there's no question. I love that, and I love the concept of that. It's so funny too. You noted like the old way of thinking. I remember growing up. Smart people control their emotions, right? Successful people control their emotions, right? You made that old cliche, and I mean, I lived that way, and that's something I've never been able to do is control my emotions. I'm a very passionate, person. I like to speak passionately, and people would look at me and go, you need to control that. And I would be like, are you
Right.
out of your mind? Like, what are you talking about? I remember before I signed the investment, I was so sick, and I had to go to the banker's office to sign documents with the new investors. I was literally walking from the boardroom to the bathroom to throw up. If that
Wow.
wasn't a sign that what I was doing was wrong for me,
Wow.
and it ended in a disaster, right? It was just a complete. But you talk about a powerful message, right? And your body trying to give you a signal, then for all of us to listen a little bit more to those types of things. So it's it's so funny. All of these things I think are critical to understanding how to create, how to be a deliberate creator, right? But but they get broken up into bits and pieces, and people hear bits and pieces. And I think that with those bits and pieces, you know, it's like putting together a car, with the motor backwards. It may run for a minute, and then it's
Mhm.
going to blow up on you, right? It's like all those pieces got to go together. And I think for me, and when I'm trying to talk to I think my daughter and our college friends about is, explain what a little bit what the law of attraction is, talk about what source is, talk about how important alignment is, talk about what momentum is, and then talk about the emotional guidance system, right? All those things together all play a role. It's a starter's kit. It's not the whole kit. It's not, a small kit, but hey, it gives you a little bit of an understanding and allows each person to go deeper, right, into each one of those areas themselves. But and I still take self-development courses, and it's always like, write down your 10 goals, read them. It's one thing. It's one thing. Write down your desires, right? Your goals, read them in the morning, read them at night, put a list in your wallet, read them during the middle of the day, right? And it's not understanding, all of the pieces that go together. And then you start to get some of those things, and you're like, well, why am I not happy? Or why am I still miserable? Or why am I still engulfed in fear?
Yeah, I think that's one of the big questions is you get the things you thought you wanted, and then you realize it wasn't. I remember there was a book years ago called something like When Everything You Always Wanted Isn't Enough.
Right? It's like, be careful what you wish for. I mean, it's been since the beginning of time. There are cliches out there that talk about this, right? So it's not like it's a new thought, right? People write songs about this kind of stuff. I got everything I wanted,
Yeah,
but it wasn't what I
yeah,
expected.
yeah, yeah.
My wife and I have been joking, so I keep saying, I said, that's it, my new job, and I, I'm more often than not um, triggered at times by aggressive people being negative. So, and I know that's a gift for me, and I'm working through those, right? But I find myself in situations, and I'm just like taking a deep breath and going like, it's okay, it works out, I get it, and just letting it go. I said to my wife the other day, I said, every morning we've been having coffee together and watching the sunrise and going, our new job is we're just crypto, we're multi-millionaire crypto investors. That's it.
Mhm.
We're done, with people. We're done talking about stuff. Her and I were both. It's so funny. There's so much negativity, and we're just accepting it. Right? But we're both talking about just accepting it, letting it go, not engaging in it, and just saying it, and just telling people like, "Wow, I really appreciate that. I'm so sorry you're going through that. I'm going to pray for you and send you my love." Right? Just having those types of reactions to people
Yeah,
go, I get it. But at the end of the day, you're exhausted. Like even Gary says
right.
after he channels, right? He's got to like go get a massage. Like at the end of the day, like at 6 o'clock of the day, my wife and I looked at each other like, I just need to go to bed. Like I can't even keep my eyes open anymore. Like I had no energy left. from that day, because all of the interaction, and once again, I'm thinking that it's all because the great thing is it didn't create fear in me. I was just like, oh, I really appreciate and what that person's going through, and hey, I'm here for you. And you know, even though it's easy to say I'm not taking that on, you do a little bit, right? You feel for that person. I don't ever want to see, and I get that that's their journey, right? But sometimes when they're in pain, I have empathy. I'm like, well, I feel for you. And that's sort of, it pulls at you a little bit. You don't fall into it. I don't want to change her condition. I don't want to change his condition. I'm not looking to do it, but I'm like, wow, I feel that.
You talked about something before about your inability to control your emotions. I want to come back to that and talk about superpowers. But when you said that you and your wife have coffee and watch the sunrise in the morning, and then you said our job is to, my mind went off to a slightly different tangent to yours. I thought you were going to say our job is to bring the sun up for everybody every morning.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, we were not in that mind space.
Yeah, well, you could imagine you're doing that though as you sit there. It might be an empowering thought. It's the first time I had that comment that you probably are familiar with, that if you look at things that you previously considered to be your biggest weaknesses or problems or issues, or that people criticized you for the most, therein lies one of your superpowers. The first time I heard that, I thought, oh, that sounds a bit trite and BS to me. But you just gave a very good example, right? Where you said that you were not able to control your emotions. People were telling you in business that you should control your emotions, that the logic you heard in business training, etc., was we must be able to control our emotions. You found you are unable to do that. And then lo and behold, you now discover that in fact was a superpower. The fact that you are in touch with your emotions, that you becomes easier for you than many other people to actually recognize the emotions, because your emotions have always been close to the surface. So, hey, lo and behold, you actually have a superpower for a thing that you and others thought was a great weakness in business.
It's funny. I didn't even realize that. You just said, it was very enlightening what you just said. I had said, hey, what was your, I look back and saying, what was my biggest limiting belief growing up? And it was that I wasn't smart enough, right? And it was a combination. I was loud and passionate, but I was so fearful, and I was constantly told that I'm not smart enough. And through these teachings, right? So everything I went to achieve, right, was to overcome that limiting belief. I don't have that limiting belief anymore. Like I fully gotten through
That's
that
awesome.
to the point.
That's awesome.
Yeah, where I'm like, no.
Especially once you were told that, once you discovered that we have an emotional guidance system, if you can recognize what the emotion is, then you know if it's a positive one, you're in alignment, and if it's a negative one, you're out of alignment, and what to do about it. And it's like, I'm way at the head of the queue in terms of acing this one. I can master that no problem at all, because I know what my emotions are. Whereas a lot of people are, I'm not sure what I feel. Like, what do I feel? They have to ask themselves.
Right. And the thing about the emotional guidance system that's interesting right now is if you accept everything, there's so much less negativity, right? So there's so much less of that, you're on the wrong course. But I'm assuming that because you're feeling acceptance and love, you're not forcing inspiration, you're not forcing actions. So you're not going down that road or making that turn that's going to require, right, a little bit more of a knock knock, you're going the wrong way, or a little bit of a course correction. So the more love and acceptance and love that you feel, the less the emotional guidance system comes into play.
Yeah. So you get little kind of minor course adjustments as you go instead of a big swerve.
Yeah. And it's so for me, all of these things, as I look at them individual, and it's like, these core 5 for me. And I mean, to me, the alignment is key, because I think it directly correlates with authenticity. Like for me, when I feel there are times, and it's momentary. It's not like, there are some people on our calls that say, I'm in alignment all day. I've been in alignment all week. Like if I'm in alignment, like I feel it, it's short. It's an amazing experience. I'm not in alignment 24/7. I am practicing and enjoying and embracing acceptance and love 24/7. I may fall out of that, but when I truly feel I'm in alignment, if a song comes on the radio or a thought gets in my head and I feel it for the first time, go from my head all throughout my body, and I kind of feel my body, tingle, I know that that is a moment of true alignment, right? And that's a gift. That's a beautiful gift.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like the people who proclaim that they're in alignment and they just, kind of got to that ascended point, it's like, well, possibly, but quite unlikely. And I believe I heard Joshua say today in the session that you can be authentic, live an authentic life if you can get to that point where you see things in the same way as your inner self. But I think they said, but not quite. You're never going to be quite in sync, because when you're based in the physical, when you're here on planet Earth, there are too many earthly concerns, I suppose, and things that you're doing. And most of us are not yet ascended beings, right? We're on a journey, and we're actually here to explore and discover contrast, and to discover, like in the non-physical, you only know abundance. So you need to discover lack in order to understand the beauty and the power of abundance. So without those contrasts in your life, you're not actually expanding. And so this is really about, you expand to this level, and then it's like, okay, let's find out what's in the next level, and then the next level. And, really you keep on going. And it's possible that we know some ascended beings who are potentially at their final incarnation because they worked it all out, but I haven't seen any yet. People like Gary and Jackie would be as close as anybody I know for me.
Yeah, I would. I mean, same with me. And I think on that note, I have a few business things I got to jump on. But Rob, as always, I love this. And thanks for being able to change times. I appreciate it.
No, thank you. Hey, have a great. You're going away this weekend, right? You're going to Vegas.
I am. Vegas, heading to Vegas in a couple of hours.
Awesome. Have a wonderful weekend. I look forward to seeing you soon.
All right, you too.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.